You're listening to the Picks from the Paddock, Turf Talk podcast.
Good evening. It is 9:10 on what is Monday, the 27th of September. I'm Rory Paddock for Picks from the Paddock, and it is, as always, every Monday night, the Turf Talk podcast. It's episode 7, and as always, I'm joined by Mr. Matt Polly and Mr. Chris Connolly. How are we doing, boys?
Super, thanks.
Not bad, Matt.
Good. Obviously, big action over Saturday just gone. So the winning of Cambridgeshire. We'll get on to that later. But looking back at recent racing, we did have 2 Group 1s on the card at Newmarket. Tenebrism and Perfect Power won respectively. I did put a little bit of a poll out there on Twitter. Basically, the question being, which of the two do you think would have a better chance of Guinea's success next year? I know we're looking way into the future now. It's not until May. But, chaps, I put that poll out. And on Twitter, just to make things really easy, it was exactly 50-50 between the pair of them. On Facebook, if I bring that up, let's see how they got on and fared with the vote there. And it was, let's have a look. Tenebrism with 66% of the votes. Perfect Power to 33% of the votes. Pretty split across the board. I know it's going to be a bit boring. I think Perfect Power is probably the better horse at this point. But if I had to pick one to go for a guinea, I think it'd be the filly in 1,000 guineas for me. I just think perhaps it's going to be handled with it. I think personally it's got more. How would I word this? I think the Colt perhaps has had a tougher 2-year-old campaign than the filly, and I think the filly could potentially be half decent back at Newmarket in the 1,000. But I think Perfect Power, I'm not sure whether or not a mile will be what the horse is after. To be honest with you, I wouldn't back either of them really as Guinea's hopes next year. But just to play the game, I would slide slightly with a Ballydoyle horse. Chris, your thoughts on the two? I
don't understand how people vote nowadays. People vote on trends and trainers alone. I can't even say her name. Tenebrism looked beaten all ends up going into the final quarter of a mile. Ran on strongly, probably on the Golden Highway, which has been a recurring theme during the flat season. Got out of trouble and won fairly comfortably. In the end, it was an eye-catching performance, but I'm not sure that form amounts to very much. I mean, Sandrine was poorly drawn in the race, ran a very good race to be fair, but she's done that a few times now. I couldn't have Tenebrism going forward for the Guineas. I know she's trained by Aidan O'Brien and everything else, but it's highly likely he's got something else. And to me, it just looked like she picked the pieces up in a pretty poor race. I think the second, Flotus, I don't know what price that horse travelled in running, but appeared to be absolutely cruising before finding very little inside the last. And I wouldn't hang my hat on either winning the Guineas, but if you put a gun to my head and forced me to pick between the two, Perfect Power was drawn 1. He lost his position during the race. It was an absolutely fantastic ride from Christophe Soumillon. Powered home at the end. I think it was a half-length victory or something like that. The correct horses were in behind. I know they finished in a little bit of a heat, but Perfect Power was a commanding winner. It was an impressive performance. He's got the form in the book, and if he was trained by Aidan O'Brien, I will absolutely guarantee you now that the vote would be significantly in his favour for the Guineas. But I mean, he's got to prove he trains on next year and everything else. And you would imagine, given that the filly has only had a couple of starts, that she's got more to come. But Perfect Power was really impressive, and you can easily upgrade his performance where you scratch your head a little bit with the fillies race.
Do you think you'd be wanting a mile? The Colt?
I don't know. I
think perhaps it was a bit unfair to the Colt, to Perfect Power. I think that's the better horse out of the two in terms of what they've achieved this season, what they've even achieved to date. I just, over a mile, would probably prefer Tenebrism. I think Perfect Power might be a bit of a more of a sprinting type, or am I perhaps being a bit unfair there?
No, it's possible. But if you watch Perfect Power, he did all his best work towards the end of the race. When he got beaten, the problem with Perfect Power actually is sometimes his positional or his tactical ability within races. He tends to not start very well. He started quite well on Saturday, actually, before going back in the field and then powering home. I wouldn't say he won't stay. I mean, obviously, people are going to look at Tenebrism because she ran on so strongly and was going away. On the eye, you would say maybe a little bit more impressive, but I wouldn't say he won't stay. He has every chance to stay. And the thing I would have with him is he going to train on. He's had a hard enough campaign, and we've seen a few 2-year-olds recently from the colt side who haven't got much better as 3-year-olds. Just as a side note for people wanting to bet these two horses for the Guineas regardless, I said this before we came on air, it's very rare you see horses come from poor track positions like that at Newmarket on either track, and on them 2 performances alone, coming from the positions both horses came from, I won't want to be taking a short price on them in a Guineas.
No, I mean, just to touch upon prices, Tenebrism, if you were to have a guess now, Chris, Tenebrism price for the Guineas 1000 next year?
Well, she's an Aidan O'Brien horse, so I could imagine 8 to 1.
Well, 8 to 1's the best price you can get. Some bookies are offering 4 to 1, which, I mean, Jesus, 4 to 1. That's, yeah, I can't be having that. And as far as the 2,000 Guineas, let's see what we've got there. We've got Perfect Power. Here we go, short as 10s. Biggest and best price is 14 to 1. I think if you're going to have a bet, Jesus, 4 to 1, you certainly wouldn't be taking Tenebrism. Matt, your thoughts on the 2?
Well, I take on board in the context of the race itself, like as Chris alluded to, Perfect Power did well in the circumstances. Like he said, he was drawn 1, not ideal. You know, the race didn't go his way, and he still ended up winning. But in terms of a Guineas, I mean, anything between 10 and 14 to 1, it should be 4 times that. This horse is never going to win a Guineas in a month. He should be 50s, Perfect Power. If you look back through Middle Parks, the last horse, this is not a good trial for the Guineas. 90% of the horses that have won this race and been placed in this race have been sprinters. You have to go back to 1991 to find the last Guineas winner to come out of this race. I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong, but Rodrigo Di Triano won the Middle Park in 1991 and then followed up in the Guineas. And if you actually look back through some of the winners and the placed horses, actually Blue Point and Memas finished 2nd and 3rd in 2016, both fast horses. You know, if you go back even further, Johannesburg won this. I think you won a July Cup, Dutch Art, Oasis Dream, all good fast horses. So this is definitely a trial race for top quality sprinters. There's no doubt about that. And Perfect Powers by our dad, I think he'd need to get in a horse box to stay a mile. And I simply can't even see him getting anywhere close in a Guineas. I'd want, if I anti-post now, I'd want 50s minimum for Perfect Power.
I thought the same, to be honest. Not to discredit him, and I think he's
absolutely
better,
absolutely.
But a mile just doesn't. I think I based my selection purely on the basis of who I thought was more likely to stay a mile, and I'd go for the Ballad horse.
And in terms of the fillies, I mean, the Cheveley Partner's got a slightly better record in terms of 1,000 Guineas success. Special Duty won it on a disqualification. You go back to Saadati, won a Guineas for Clyde Britton, and Alcohol Free, of course, won it last season. You know, she's probably the best of the last 15 years to win that race. So the one thing Tenebrism has got in her favour is to go and win a Group 1.
Name.
To go and win a Group 1 on the back of a maiden win earlier on in the season is super impressive. But again, you can pick holes in what she be. I think Perfect Power was the best of a moderate bunch. I think take Perfect Power out of that race and run that race 10 times again, you get a different winner every time. So what's he beat? And you could argue the fillies are the same. So the price about both of them is absolute nonsense. Particularly the colt. I get the filly, but the filly should be 20s minimum.
I mean, 4 to 1 with one firm is I just had shocked. Obviously, we saw other bits of racing, which we will get onto later. I think credit's where credit's due. I think last week anyone who watched or listened heard us pick out our fantasy stable. For those that don't know who were in our fantasy stable, head on over to our Facebook or Twitter, or even have a little replay of last week's show where Chris stiffed me by taking Black Caviar and Matt did the same by pinching my See the Stars, you bastards. However, as expected, Matt came out on top with 54.2% of the vote, Chris with 33 in the third, and my lonely, sorry little ass came home with 12.5%. I mean, I think if I'd done that again, one, I got the first vote, I should have done Black Caviar. I was being nice, didn't I let you have to See the Stars. I should have gone Enable. I think I went a bit too obscure with Mum and Mouth or Rose, but I mean, credit Larry's G, Matt. See the Stars, can't really argue with that. Chris, clearly crime does pay, you absolute thief. But yeah, no, I didn't have a cat in house chance, did I? I mean, I'd say class prevails, Matt, probably.
Well, I think, to be honest, I probably would, if I'd have only picked See the Stars, I probably would have won it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you should have done a 1 mile division, especially if I got first. If I got first choice,
he probably would have won. He probably would have won from 1 mile to 2 miles. See the Stars, so I've got it all covered.
Either way, right? Yeah, you bastards. But next week I want to do something similar. So I'm giving you a week's notice. Don't worry, it's not as overly complicated as last week, and it's not horses. It's going to be jockeys.
Oh, great.
If you've got a stable and you've got 4 jockeys that you have sort of as your go-to riders, one needs to be over the age of 40, one needs to be under the age of 25, and another 2 you can have across the board, whatever you like. We will do it exactly the same as we did last time. We'll pick who goes first. We'll go back and forth between the 2 until we've got our 4. You can have them in any order, not specifically, any sort of.
Is it the best jockeys or the worst jockeys?
I mean, I think for now we'll go best. If it goes well, we can go worst. We can have a bend. I mean, are we going to include bans for substances? Are we going to include bans for not knowing how to ride? I mean. Just make a few notes now, but you've got a week's notice. There we go. Chaps, we obviously looked at last weekend's racing. As we always do, we'll look back at last week's racing overall with what we have as our notebook horses. That means any horses that you like the look of that race in the last 7 days that our listeners and viewers should be putting in their trackers or in their little notebooks, because it is time for the racing notebook. I'll kick things off first, chaps. Perhaps a bit of a boring or maybe slightly obvious one. Obviously, 30-odd runners in the Cambridgeshire. There's probably a handful you can pick out of there. I'm going to go with Zosimus. Finished 4th in the race. Comes from the yard of Joseph O'Brien. Was one of, I think it was the best of what came from like the smaller, the lower draws came from stall 4. It's a 3-year-old. It won't have gone up much in the weights at all, I don't think, for that effort. I think it'll end up going back to Ireland and it'll probably pick up a prize somewhere over there, maybe some sort of decent handicap. I think also at the age of 3, compared to a lot of his older rivals, it raced with at Newmarket. It's got a bit more room to progress. Again, perhaps a little bit boring, but was pretty woeful, actually. Ended up finishing 4th at 100 to 1. Pretty woeful most of the season until that decent effort in the Cambridgeshire. I think, like we said, a bit of a golden highway. To have come from stall 4 and to do as well as he did compared to the rest, I think that's a pretty decent indication. At the age of 3, definite room to progress and should pick up a part somewhere. Whether there's any sort of winter racing festivals over in Ireland still left on the flat, I'm not too sure. But maybe Joseph O'Brien can capitalise and see that.
Donica O'Brien.
Donica O'Brien, even. Jesus. That's the one.
just say O'Brien, it's fucking easier.
Yeah, you cover every base, don't you? You cover every base. Just cough and then say O'Brien in, hey, presto. But yeah, Zosimus for me, chaps. Matt, anything you like the look of over the last week?
Well, only one really. I mean, I can't stop thinking about it. Caribus, who looks an absolute magnificent horse in the, to look at in the flesh. Absolute beast of a horse, and
cost me a few pennies.
I mean, I've never seen anything quite like it, really. I mean, he cantered his way through the race, put the race to bed a furlong and a half down, and wilted close home. But I don't know whether. I think it was a conscious decision from Buick. I generally think he thought he got so much horse underneath him that he just put the race to bed and the horse would gallop out to the line easy peasy, and it didn't quite. I mean, if he could ride that race again, he'd have hung on for longer. There's no doubt about it. But I think it might be the level of regard they've got for this horse that he thought when he pushed the button, it'd be all over, and in all intents and purposes, it was until the last 50 yards when he just seemed to run out of steam. I mean, he's a great big horse. For a 2-year-old, and he carries a lot of condition, and maybe he just blew up going up the hill. I don't know, but I mean, I'm virtually certain if those two horses meet again, I don't think the Johnston horse would beat him if they raced again, and Buick could have his chance again. I mean, he's got a beautiful pedigree. He's by Dubawi out of a Teofilo mare. I mean, a mile's well within his compass. I mean, he's quite a free going, not a free going horse. He's just got a big stride, likes to get on with it. So I imagine a mile, probably long term, will be his trip. Let him stride along. But he's one of these horses. I think he wants a good pace to aim at, get into a stride behind, and then probably wait a little bit longer because, like I said, when Buick said go, he went and put 6 or 7 lengths between them, but all went wrong, didn't it? Last 100 yards, but
I mean, like I said, it did cost me a few pennies, did its loss, but what made it sweet was seeing the video circulate from good old Bilogsy of him cheering the horse home just to be consoling his little Italian friend when it lost. That was sweet, sweet tears seeing that clown lose. But anyway, Chris, anything over the last week?
Yeah, I quite like Corobus as well, to be honest. But I don't.
Here we go, stealing other people's horses again. Classic wank.
I'm gonna pinch another one of Matt's in a minute as well. To be fair, I like Corobus myself. Like I was saying, really imposing type on the eye, and unlike Matt, I will be unkind to William Buick. That was a desperate ride to be doing things like that at Newmarket. I've seen plenty of horses at Newmarket stop before. There was plenty of horses over the weekend actually that stopped once they got to the front. But he's obviously going to improve for that. You can see him being a top end type next year when he's grown into himself properly. I just think on that occasion Buick got well overexcited with himself, and although he's been beaten, realistically speaking, he's the one you take out of it without any shadow of a doubt. He would absolutely pan that Johnson horse. They went against each other again, and that was just a bad one from William Buick. End of story. Should have won, didn't win because his jockey got overexcited. That's all there's to say about it. I have one out of the Cambridgeshire as well. This is another one of Matt's, so he's going to be happy with me this week. But Long Tradition, I think Matt put him up as a saver. I actually had the Cambridgeshire exactly the same as Matt. I like Lucander as well, but the ground never came, and that horse was disappointing. It didn't show enough for me to be wanting to bet next time or going forward. I think there's a good pot in the horse, but still disappointing from my point of view. But Long Tradition is unexposed, only had a few runs. Marco Gianni, I thought he got a bit excited as well. He went off very quick from the front, and when horses came past him, he just looked like he lacked a gear. Inside the final furlong, he was starting to come again, but couldn't get a run, which I like to see a horse like that. And I think if they go up in trip, he's got plenty of scope for more improvement, and he'd definitely be one that I'd be keeping on side next year when he's got a little bit bigger, a bit more experienced. He's got a nice pot in him.
All right, folks, so those are our 3. Make sure you put them in the trackers and your notebooks, however you make a little note, and hopefully we'll end up putting a bit of money in your back pocket if they come in. Chaps, Again, there's not been too much going on in the racing world, so it's going to be a bit of a short one tonight. So last week, who am I? Which remind me, who won? It was you, wasn't it, Mr. Connolly? Absolutely stormed home.
Landslide.
Absolute landslide. Now, I did mention last week that this week's version of Who Am I is going to be all about Saturday's big race, which was the Cambridgeshire. Over the last 20 odd years, well, 21 since the year 2000 upwards, going to be discussing and giving Cambridgeshire winners. You've had a week to prepare. Don't shake your head. You've had a week to prepare.
Week to prepare. I was still on tit when these Cambridgeshires were run.
Yeah. From the year 2000, bloody hell, you're not claiming to be younger than me. You can sod off. Right, so, chaps, get ready for another game.
Who am I?
Right, chaps, for those that don't know, for those that are new to this, I have 5 horses in front of me, 5 clues with each horse. All of them are running theme. This theme it is Cambridgeshire winners since the year 2000 even. I'll give 5 clues. If someone can get it within within the first clue is 5 points, 2 clues, 4 points, 3 clues, 3 points, 4 clues, 2 points. So I don't even know myself. 5 clues, 1 point each. All they have to do is shout out the name. If they get it wrong, then they cannot guess on that horse, and the other person has an opportunity. So, chaps, without further ado, the first horse up, the first of 5 clues. Fingers on buzzers. Here we go. Clue number 1, horse number 1. Frankie Dettori claimed winning rides in back-to-back Cambridgeshires. I am the second of these 2 race victors. Frankie Dettori claimed winning rides in back-to-back Cambridgeshires. I am the second.
Chris.
Matt.
That was Matt.
I'm going Lord North.
Yeah.
I went off the 9-2 favourite. I was a 3-year-old who carried 8 stone 10. My most recent success came in a Group 1 race at Meydan in March 2021. My biggest career success came in the Group 1 Prince of Wales Stakes at Ascot, where I finished ahead of Adabe and Barney Roy. I am indeed Lord North. That, Mr. Polly, is Matt 5. Mr. Connolly 0.
Also put that in our 60 to follow book. If
Yeah,
anyone
I
wanted to buy it.
You did indeed. Here we go. Here we go. Horse number 2. Clue number 1. I won this race back in 2012 under jockey William Buick.
Bronze Angel.
Yeah.
Matt gave this up last week.
It's the horse that Matt gave in his fantasy stable. It's Bronze Angel, indeed. Other clues for those that are listening. One of my other big hands in the Balmoral at Ascot 2 years later. I lost my maiden tag at the 6th time of asking when winning a maiden race at Lingfield in December 2011, 9 months prior to my Cambridgeshire success. Clue number 4. After winning the Class 2 Potter Logistics Handicap at Doncaster in September 2015, I raced a further 18 times, but never won again prior to retiring 3 years later. And clue number 5, I won the Cambridgeshire 2 years after my first race success under a jockey who held a £5 claim. It is indeed Bronze Angel. 5.
We talked about these horses last week.
We did indeed. You're moaning. I'm helping you here. I'm helping you.
Matt gives the book. Oh, Jesus, what?
Next week we'll be doing it in crayons just to help you out, so it'll be fine. Horse number 3. It is indeed 5-all. Clue number 1. In the 44 years of this race, I am the biggest priced horse ever to win it at odds of 100 to 1.
Matt.
Jesus.
Is it Dolphin Vista?
No.
Ooh.
Dolphin Vista won at 50 to 1. It is not. So we've got another 4 clues for Mr. Connolly. If you can pounce and capitalise, Matt has to sit there perfectly still.
I know who it is now.
Uh-oh.
Clue number 2.
Tell me.
Clue number 2. I started my career owned by Khalid Abdullah and trained in France by Pascal Barry. Clue number 3. After my Cambridgeshire victory, I only won another race in my entire career. That was a listed race back at Newmarket. Clue number 4. A £3 claimer rode me when I won the big handicap. It was still riding to this day. Just to clarify, no longer a £3 claimer. And clue number 5. Despite changing yards, I had to make another stable change before settling with my long-term trainer, David Ellsworth. Yeah.
Spanish Don.
Correct.
Well, that was total god. No idea.
Right, Spanish Don indeed won at 100 to 1 with David Ellsworth and claiming jockey at the time, Liam Canary. I think rode the horse that day. So Mr. Connolly takes the lead, 5-6. Horse number 4. Here we go. Clue number 1. At least it's tighter than it was last week. It's not a walkover, Matt. We're all right. Horse number 4, clue number 1. I retired from racing in 2016. And in my last 22 starts, I won just one of them. The shortest SP I went off at in all of those starts was 8 to 1. For the remaining 21 outings, I was double figure odds. So in his last 22 starts, it was 21 times, it was double figure prices. The shortest SP he was in those last 22 runs was 8 to 1. And he only won one of them. Clue number 2. My last victory came in July 2013 in the Coral Challenge at Sandown, where I won at odds of 16 to 1 by beating SK Love into second.
Chris. Oh.
Matt got in there.
Is it Prince Johan?
It is Prince Johan. It is indeed Chris's handicap horse from last week. Prince of Johan. 4 points to Matt. 6 to Chris. All with one horse left. For those that are listening, clue number 3 was I started my racing career with trainer Jeremy Nacida. I was owned by Michael Tabor, Susan Roy, and Mr. M. Green before being gelded after my 7th race and changing hands. Clue number 4, in my Cambridgeshire win, I was partnered by a jockey who then claimed £3. The jockey no longer has his claim, and this season has predominantly ridden for both Clive Cox and Richard Hannon. Clue number 5, Chris, you'll know this. I was a massive 40 to 1 when winning the Newmarket handicap in 2011.
Bollocks.
Hey, yeah, fuck you too. That's for stealing black caviar, you cunt. Horse number 5, still all to play for. 9-6 to Matt. Clue number 1. I was trainer Saeed bin Sarour's first Cambridgeshire winner. Clue number 2. Prior to my Cambridgeshire win, my most recent success came over in Maidan. Clue number 3. My Cambridgeshire victory came under a jockey that was riding me for the first ever time.
What years are this from?
From 2000 onwards.
I still don't know it.
Clue number 4. In my 26 race starts, I've been ridden by Pat Cosgrave 5 times, Hector Crouch 4 times, and Frankie Dettori also 4 times. However, between them, they've only managed to steer me to victory once. And clue number 5. I won the big race under Jamie Spencer at 40 to 1.
Fucking hell, Chris.
Chris.
Bedouin Story.
It is Bedouin Story. It's the horse that won on Saturday. However, despite that, it wasn't enough. Matt gets back on top of the throne. Not only does he do it, but he does it by taking Chris's best ever handicapper, who he regales everyone with tales of, and his punting prowess. Take some of that, Mr. Connolly.
Rob. I can't believe he got oh dear.
Stitched up like a kipper. Well, in fairness, you both didn't get your own favourite handicap horses, so
on my notes, I've got some stuff that Matt said last week with Bronze Angel, but I can't believe it didn't get me on horse.
So there we go. Matt's back on top, 9-6. Obviously next week it's the Arc, if I'm correct. We've got the Arc to look forward to, so we will be doing next week's with Arc winners since the year 2000. So hopefully you've got a week to potentially brush up. We'll be doing our Fantasy Stables Jockeys Edition as well, Flat Jockeys Edition. So make sure you like, follow, and share this podcast. Give it a decent voting as well, whether or not you're listening to it on Spotify, Apple, iTunes, all that nonsense. I've been Rory Paddock with these two idiots, and this has been episode 7 of the 2021 season of the Turf Talk podcast.